Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to all of you. Last year we had Best Book of 2021. So we come back again this year with Artopia Best Book of 2022. This one of the event that was held under the project RE.A.D Bintang Dalam Dakapan. My name is Hazim and as for today, I will be your host. Before we get started, please make sure that you guys follow and like to our post regarding this event at our social media platform such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and also don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel, Kita TV. For your information, the link to attendance, Google form, and QR code will be given at the end of the program. So I hope the attendees will stick through with us until the end of the program. Best Book of 2022 is the sharing station event of the best book throughout the year of 2022. We will discuss with our speakers regarding what books they find, the top 5 mysteries, top 3 memoir, and top 10 best book of 2022. Now, you guys must be curious, who is our speaker, right? Without wasting any time, let me introduce to you our speaker for today, Dr. Ahmad Kamal Basyah Sallehuddin. He is our KP Pengajian Seni Diurang for College Pengajian Seni Kreatif. Thank you and welcome again, Dr. Kamal. We are so glad that you have initiated to this event again this year. Previously, you had conducted the same event, which the best book of 2021. And as for this year, we can't wait for what books that you have in hand for the best book of 2022. Without further ado, we would like to invite Dr. Kamal to start presenting for the best book of 2022.
All right. Hi, Assalamualaikum and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Hazim. I believe he is still single, so ladies, you can actually ask my phone numbers later. Or if he is not, tough luck. All right, I am Kamal, as he introduced me, and I was with you guys last year for the best books of 2021, and a lot of things happened ever since. So this year there were some changes with this year's program. So I will not announce any selections for best nonfiction because I have to admit this year I did not read enough nonfiction books because my life itself is nonfiction on its own nature. I had COVID like everyone else in this world. And in March, I was given these huge responsibilities to look after a brand new program. So now I have plenty more children and they are working right behind the scene at this moment. And Azim is included as one of them. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the best books of 2022. I'd say it was a rather eventful year. What I really enjoyed was actually Penguin finally released these deluxe editions of comics, Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Captain America. I always forget Captain's good looks. And after 16 years, Stella Maris, and also, I can't remember the title. That is Stella Maris, and that is The Passenger. After 16 years, his last novel is called The Road, which won Pulitzer Prize, and also was chosen as Oprah's book club. Now, speaking of book prizes, I would like to also share some books or some authors that finally got their recognition in 2022. First, I don't know how. Annie Ernaux, okay, won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Ruth Ozeki won Best Novel at the Women's Prize with her novel The Book of Form and Emptiness. The Booker Prize 2022, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida from Shehan Karuntelaka. And the National Book Awards winner for Best Fiction is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Ganti. I also would like to inform you that for Pulitzer Prize Joshua Cohen actually, Joshua Cohen won Best Fiction for his novel The Netanyahus. Unfortunately, I can't locate my copies because that's just me. All right, so as I've mentioned earlier, I did not have a specific category for best nonfiction because I did not read enough nonfiction books. I, however, found solace in a number of really wonderful memoirs and biographies, and to read about the fascinating ride, the thrill, the sadness, the happiness. I would say there were three books that I would like to recommend all of you if you guys are readers. I'm sure that some of you, when you grow up, you actually watch Nickelodeon. You are familiar with iCarly and Sam and Cat. So at number three, I would like to share I'm Glad My Mom Died. Well, the topic is not sopan, it's not kesopanan and kesusilaan at all. However, the story is actually heartbreaking. Written, not story, the book itself is heartbreaking, written by actress Jeanette McCurdy. So, McCurdy actually wrote her experience as a child actor in Hollywood, how she was exploited and she abused her mentally, and how she actually did not get the same opportunity as her co-star Ariana Grande when they were together in Sam and Cat. So this is actually a showbiz memoir that you should get. I'm glad my mom died. And try not to read this book in front of your mother or your relatives, as they will question your motive. Why are you reading this book? But this is actually a very heartbreaking memoir, and I hope that if you think that life as a star is glamorous, you will think twice. Um, just pursue your study here at College of Creative Arts and be real. Okay, at number two is actually from Amy Bloom, In Love, a memoir of love, a memoir of love and loss by Amy Bloom. This is actually a memoir about Amy Bloom and her husband Brian. When her husband Brian actually was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, he decided to end his life by moving to Switzerland, so that his death will be assisted euthanasia, assisted suicide. So the journey of when they started flying together from America to Switzerland, and how they spent the last days with Bright, how Bloom actually spent her last days with her husband. And this book is actually showed what true love is all about, where acceptance and just, I would say, anticipating the death of your loved ones. Now, if I were to read this book prior to COVID, the age of COVID, it's just going to be just another sentimental memoir. But because I was reading this book while we are still going through COVID, I would say that it made me appreciate our loved ones. It could be our parents, our siblings, our other immediate family members, and make you think twice about those family members that you hated. Maybe. So at number two is In Love by Amy Bloom. Okay, at number one, the best memoir that I can actually recommend and share with you is Solito by Javier Zamora. Solito is actually a memoir of this poet, okay, Javier Zamora. As a child, he actually grew up in, let me get the country right. He actually grew up in El Salvador, and both his parents actually migrated illegally to the United States. So when the time came for him to actually move to the United States, he had to travel through Guatemala, Mexico, and went through the deserts in the USA before he finally reunited with his parents. Now, it's not all fine and dandy, as he actually traveled all by himself at 9 years old, and he was traveling with other strangers, but he was not accompanied by any family members. He survived everything on his own, and this book actually kind of remind you or remind myself to be grateful for the life that I've experienced growing up, because I didn't have to go through to what he went through when he tried to find a better life in the United States. And it's more profound for me while I was reading the book, as I was when I bought this book and I was reading the book on a 14-hour plane ride from Newark to Tokyo, because I just evacuated Florida because of the Hurricane Ian while I was there. So I finished the whole book throughout the plane trip, um, because the plane food is not really nice. So why don't we read, right? So if you need to read only one memoir anytime soon, I would recommend Solito, Javier Zamora. So those are my top three memoirs and autobiography for 2022. Growing up, I love reading mysteries and thrillers. Some of the earliest books that I remembered from my younger days, I'm still young, my younger days, um, were actually books from Enid Blyton, Hardy Boys, or even Nancy Drew, and I actually read them in both English and also its Bahasa Malaysia translation. Now, because of that, I have a special place of mysteries and thriller in me. So I would like now to announce the top five mysteries and thrillers of 2022. At number five is The Maid by Nita Prose. Now, the book is actually about a housekeeper named Molly who was working at a, I would say, a boutique hotel. And then he actually stayed with his grandmother after the passing of her parents. And when her grandmother died, she continued working at this hotel until one day she actually opened a door and discovered one of the guests murdered. And because of that, she fainted. And later, a couple of days later, she was accused of murdering Mr. Black, the aforesaid hotel guest. So the whodunit is actually very interesting. And this is Nita Prose's first book. And if you love feel good, lightweight mystery, you will actually enjoy The Maid. At number four is Lucy Foley and the Paris Apartment. This is Lucy Foley's third book. Okay, this is a story about a young woman from London who actually ran away to Paris to be with her brother, her half brother, only to find out that her half brother went missing. So she actually had to find a way to locate her missing half brother with the assistance of an editor and another good looking neighbor in the apartment building. I cannot go into much details because I don't want to share spoilers. But this is actually something that would remind you of the early good books of Agatha Christie. So Lucy Foley, The Paris Apartment at number four. At number three, this book actually has a little bit of, I would say a little bit, it has thriller and it has gothic horror a little bit. And this is Shutter by Ramona Emerson. Like Nita Prose, this is also a debut novel from author. So this is actually about, I like to check the character's name, Rita, who is a forensic photographer, and she's Navajo, and she has this gift of communicating with dead people. Um, for some reason, one day, a very angry ghost actually convinced her to investigate of a case, and this case actually dragged Rita to the underworld of uh, gangsters in New Mexico. It's very interesting. It is so good that it was longlisted for the National Book Awards 2022. So, Shutter, Ramona Emerson. At number two is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is Riley Sager's fifth book, and I actually selected one of his books last year, and I am going to select one of his books this year. Riley Sager really captured, I would say, the thrill and the plot twist. He is a master of plot twists. You would never guess what's the ending. It is so unpredictable. So this book is actually about a recently widowed actress by the name of Cassie Fletcher. So in order for her to actually uh, to gain her confidence, she actually relocated herself to a house out of town, and she actually always spied on her neighbor. A supermodel who was married to a successful man, only one day to find out that the neighbor, the female neighbor, went missing. So she actually launched her own investigation instead of going to the police. Now, again, I'll not go much into details, but The House Across the Lake is definitely a great mystery book if you really like mm, Murder on the Orient Express, and if you really like plot twist, unpredictable plot twist. That's what I'm trying to say. And finally, the number one mystery thriller of 2022 is Richard Osman's The Bullet That Missed. This is Richard Osman's third book. Uh, I selected his book, The Man Who Died Twice, last week. And this year, Richard Osman came back even better with this book about I would say, four retired investigators, Ron, Ibrahim, Elizabeth, and Joyce. And this time they actually had to deal with two cases simultaneously: a murdered television reporter, and at the same time, Elizabeth was asked to murder a former KGB agent as she was being threatened by the Viking. I'll reveal who the Viking is. So there are two cases that they need to solve simultaneously. And believe me, later this year, Richard Osman will actually release another book from this series, the Thursday Murder Club series. So this is the number one mystery thriller for 2022, The Bullet That Missed. All right. So there, I actually have shared with you my choices for best memoirs and mystery thriller. So I would say all these books are available at our local bookstores. Speaking of bookstores, I am so ecstatic that here in Kuala Lumpur, we have two more new bookstores that just opened to join the other remaining bookstores like Kinokuniya, MPH, Popular, and the rest. So there's a Sutaya at Pavilion Bukit Jalil, and last month, S-Light Spectrum at the Star Hill Gallery. So there are more choices for people here in Kuala Lumpur or from around Malaysia if you visit Kuala Lumpur to buy your books in addition to the other bookstores that we have. Of course, my personal favorite will always be either Kinokuniya or MPH. Kinokuniya because of its vast collection, and MPH because of its sentimental value, as it is the only bookstore that I grew up that is still in business. There was also another smaller independent bookstore, Lead Books, that I like to go if you want to actually stay away from the crowd. And that Lead Book is actually located in Tropicana. All right, we have something different this year. I am not alone. I mean, in addition to Hazim, I will be accompanied by my special guest from Two Book Nerds Talking. So stay tuned, and we will be right back right after this break.
Okay, we are going to take a break right now. So don't go anywhere, guys. Stay tuned. come back again, guys. You guys must be wondering who are our special guests today, right? Now, I will leave you with Dr. Kamal and his special guest.
All right, so for the first time in the history of best books of the Artopia best book series, I'm not alone. I'll be joined by two book nerds talking. Well, they're not really nerds because by chance, if you look at them, they are like, I would say, movie star quality readers. Um, well, I first started, I started knowing them when I was invited to join the KLBAC, which is a Facebook group full of avid and ferocious readers. So it gives me great pleasure and an honor to welcome my two guests, Datin Diana Yeong, whom I'm going to address as Diana, and also Hani Ahmad. Ladies,
Hello.
good evening. Hi.
Hi.
Evening. Evening.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay. It's like a slight
All
silent
right.
moment there
Sorry.
for a
Yeah,
while.
I'm trying to fix the sound. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I know that there are you could go anywhere and you could have spend your time somewhere else. So thank you so much for joining my students and I for this program. So I'm just going to straight to go to the first question, Dinah and Hani. um, when did you guys started reading, and what was that first book that made you realize that you are a lifelong reader?
You want to jump in, honey?
I guess it was the Mr. Man books. I loved them as a child. I love the fact that somebody can be so creative, that these cartoons had personalities. And when I was small, my mother was very indulgent, so she used to just leave me in a bookstore for 3 hours and go set her hair. I don't think people do that anymore, but in those days, right, the bookstore or the library was sort of like my babysitter. And I think she really instilled the love of reading in me. And there wasn't any book she would not allow me to read. So I was a voracious reader from a very young age, probably about three. Diana, you're about the same, right? I think you were also left in a lot of libraries and bookstores.
Yeah. My earliest memory was this huge book of fairy tales that I absolutely loved to bits. Yeah, I think I started reading around about age of 4. So this is about age 5, I think. And I think it was the first book that I chose for myself. So that was a big deal to me. And for some reason it's just I mean that the memory of that book really has like sustained me all these years. I remember very clearly taking the pages. I remember very clearly remembering the stories and really like feeling like, oh my god, like these are so amazing stories, even though they were like basically just the Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Jack and the Beanstalk kind of stories. And but yeah, to a 5-year old they really blow your mind.
Yeah, I think we all started somewhere, especially like reading those fairy tales. I remembered that the Ladybug Classics was actually is a permanent or a major staple in most kids' bedroom when at least when I grew up, and I think Honey and I are about the same age.
Yeah.
So when which is 29.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, all of us,
Absolutely.
Diana
Can't you
and
tell?
I, and Diana, Honey, and I are all 29. In order for you
Yeah.
to stay 29, you have to be a reader. Okay,
Yes.
so
I
yeah,
like that.
so like, do you remember what was your favorite bookstore when you grew up, and what is your favorite place to shop for books now?
Oh, I would say it's not a store. I would say it was the Ipoh Library. In those days, the Ipoh Library was pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. And I grew up in Ipoh. There really wasn't that many bookstores at that time. I think at some point we had a novel hut. I'm sure we had an MPH, but I went a lot to the Ipoh Library. I don't know whether it's even. I think it's still. I think it's still operational. today. I think we don't really actually appreciate our libraries enough, to be honest. Now I think my main bookstore is Kinokuniya. I live 8 minutes from it, which is very dangerous. So anytime I want a book, it's just 8 minutes to get a book.
Confession time, honey. Honey and I were just at Kinokuniya yesterday. So
Yeah.
it shows
We
how
had our
important
meeting
it
there.
is for us. Yeah. By I also connected to this the first book that I ever read, my book of fairy tales. The first bookstore that I remember, the most memorable bookstore from my childhood is actually the bookstore that I got this book at, and that was actually a floating bookstore. It was a ship that was traveling around the world that would stop at different ports along the way. And yeah, I remember going to this ship and being really amazed at all the books that were in there, and getting to choose. I mean, like, I didn't get out much as a 5-year-old, so that was a big experience for me, and it has really with me until now. Sadly, I haven't had the chance to encounter this ship again. Um, I know that there is a ship called the Logos Hope that does this still. It's a floating library and bookstore. I don't know if that was the ship that I encountered, but yeah, I think I'm hopeful that it was. Um, and yeah, I mean, bookstores, just like honey, my mother would like leave me at bookstores, and we would be basically, yeah, libraries would be our second home. So that is one thing that I'm eternally grateful for, to have these book spaces that we can go to as children and just explore books, just read whatever was there. I mean, basically we read through the entire library as kids, and yeah, I mean, those were really good memories. I think that was one of the things that really cemented for me the importance of bookstores, where you can actually just explore anything that was in there. Just open up a book, go to the library, just go to any shelf, open up a book, and you have a different adventure every single time.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. See, I tried to actually like going to the library, but the only setback was that I can never own those books. Like
You gotta
you
give it
can never
back.
be a book hoarder. Yeah, you have to give it back, and the fact that sometimes you actually when you try to when you borrowed it, it was no longer in a good condition as compared to when you first buy a new book, right? So I think along the way, I mean, as we grow matured, sometimes we have different, like our tastes in reading change. We used to actually like one author when we were a teenager, and we would move to another author when we are the expired teenagers. So, who are some of your favorite authors, past and present?
Oh, well, both me and Diana, I think, are what we call Harukis. We both like Haruki Murakami a lot. I love John Krakauer because he writes non-fiction that is like fiction, because he wrote Into the Wild, he wrote Under the Banner of Heaven, which is on the Mormon community. And I used to love Paul Auster. Now I like Jumpa Lahiri a lot whenever she writes. I love Ru Ozeki as well. Can I just show you that I actually have an autographed copy of the Book of Former
Yeah, sure,
Emptiness?
sure, sure. Go ahead.
It's autographed somewhere. Ta-da! Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I have to say one good thing. I'm a huge fantasy reader. In those days, I love high fantasy when I was growing up. But I find that my reading taste now is a lot more varied. And I think the great thing about doing a podcast with Diana is that we actually read out of our comfort zone all the time. So that's what's good about doing, like, a book show in a way, because we want to represent the Malaysian reader. So we also read all kinds of stuff. Plus, now you have more authors from our part of the world. So we have a lot more own voices, kind of like books, as opposed to when you were growing up, it's a lot of dead white male kind of like authors. But now there's so much variety out there. So readers today are so lucky because there's so much accessibility to so much diversity in reading.
Yeah, I have to say that if there are different authors that I'm reading now, it's just because there's so much variety. There's so many more people putting out books that you can choose from. And there's different genres. There's so many. Like if you allow yourself to explore, you'll find that there's just unlimited like material out there for you to get into. Yeah, just like Honey, I really would buy anything that Haruki Murakami puts out. Um, Also Margaret Atwood books. Um, yeah, I have certain authors that I think I would definitely buy, but I think as I've grown older, I tend less young maybe. there there there's an understanding that I don't always go the same way that my favorite authors do, so they may not necessarily write the things that I'm currently interested in. And I think just being able to know that they're there when I want to, but not necessarily have to read them the moment the book hits the bookstore the way I used to. Yeah, there are a lot of authors that I've actually still stuck to through the years, mostly fantasy authors like Robin Hobb. Philippa Gregory is a historical fiction author that I really love. Leanne Hearn writes mostly Asian fantasy. Juliet Marillier. Yeah, most of them are fantasy authors. But yeah, I've found a lot of very interesting sci-fi authors such as Becky Chambers, Ted Chiang, Simon Jimenez. Recently, I've been reading a lot of his books, and also Becky Chambers. I'm sorry, Martha Wells is another author that I really like. So yeah, I think I'm having a lot of fun just branching out from my favorite authors, but it's nice to know that they're there and they're still putting out stuff so that I can come back to them when I feel like it.
I mean, like both of you actually really enjoyed fantasy, and I actually tried reading Cersei from Madeline Miller. It just didn't cut for me. So perhaps I need to actually learn the art of patience of reading fantasy. You know, um, that would actually surprise a lot of my friends to know that I have Cersei in my collection. So, what are some of the titles that may surprise me, or I mean, like for readers, we just buy any books. But what are some of the titles that you think people will surprise to find in your collection?
Oh, you want to take this first, Diana? I have to think about this.
Okay. Okay. I do like reading fantasy, but one thing that is a little bit out of my wheelhouse is dark fantasy. Um, but I picked up this book called Empire the Vampire by Jade Kristoff at the beginning of 2022. And it's actually an epic fantasy about a holy warrior who must defend mankind against this massive horde of vampires. So it's very bloody, gritty, gory, and it's really just ridiculously over the top. But for some reason, I just couldn't put it down. So that was something that was completely out of my, normal reading. Um, and what else would be something that was completely different? I guess I also own some titles by James S.A. Corey, which is what they are a pair of authors that have written the Expanse series, which is very much very hard sci-fi kind of books, and that's something that is not my normal as well. It's a bit of a departure from my usual fantasy kind of preferences. Um, Maybe memoirs as well. I read Barack Obama's A Promised Land, which is, yeah, really not something that I would normally pick up because, yeah, not really a memoir person, and especially not political memoirs. But that was a good book.
Actually, now come to think of it, right? I suppose I don't often read that much nonfiction. The nonfiction that I read are cookbooks. So, like this year, I was reading Michael Schu's How to Be Perfect. And generally, I do enjoy some nonfiction, but people always know me as a fiction reader. So that's probably quite surprising. I read a lot of middle grade books. I read a lot of children's books. Catherine Arden, who writes The Bear and the Nightingale, has a children's, a kind of like a middle grade series, which is quite creepy. I quite like it. It's called Small Spaces. It's about three friends that basically have to go against the smiling man. So I think that that might be quite surprising for a lot of people, because I think a lot of my friends think that I'm quite literary, but I also like to read a lot of crime. I like to read a lot of, I occasionally read romance. So I think sometimes you need a palate cleanser between the heavier reads. You know, you have the big reads, and then you probably read a Stephen King to just kind of chill out a bit, and then you read a bigger read after that. Yeah.
You I don't know, when you said that you chill up a bit with a Stephen King book, I think that is adventurous, like, because to chill, relax, and a Stephen King book, I don't think they are alike, or falls into the same group. And I kind of like the fact that Diana mentioned that she read A Promised Land from Obama. For some reason, actually, I also tried reading that book, and as much as a lot of people really love Obama, I just cannot finish that one. I felt that Michelle Obama's book was way better, perhaps
Yeah.
because her memoir was less political as compared to her husband's. Yeah. But since you're not reading any memoir, let me tell you, if you read Soli, uh, Solito, which I recommended earlier, I think it's like you are reading it like a novel. So I'm sure that you would enjoy that one of these days, whenever that you have any spare time to read. Now, I was wondering, did you guys know each other prior to your involvement into Book Nerds Talking? Or did you guys also meet through KLBAC?
Well, I mean, that Diana was one of the founding members of KLBAC. And yeah, I kind of met her through KL Back. And then I joined some of her book discussions. And then one day I thought, hey, I want to do a book podcast with somebody who's just as much of a reader as I am. So I asked Diana. And I think the story we always tell people is that she just read Shonda Rhimes' My Year of Yes. So it was her year of yes. So she said yes to me. And here we are 4 years later, still doing a podcast.
Which is, I think, which is great, because I think this is the first of its kind, right?
I probably safe to say that we're probably the longest running podcast, probably in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, I think.
Mm,
I right, Diana? I think we can claim that.
I think
20,
so.
yeah, 2018.
Yeah,
That's when we started.
you can check that.
Mm.
And you guys always come up with reading challenges, um, which I tried to follow in 2020, but COVID happened, and I lost all hope and motivation, because online classes and the art of mastering Google Classroom and Google Meet and WebEx took a toll on my spare time. I have to actually fall back to reading things that make me feel comfortable.
Mm,
So maybe I'll try to actually challenge myself again. So coming back to Book Nerds Talking, did you manage to actually meet or interview renowned authors in and out of Malaysia?
oh
Yep.
yeah, we've actually spoken to a number of quite famous authors. Probably, I would say the most famous one is Andy Weir. The author of The Martian. Um, and I don't know. I mean, like the one that I was the most it, I guess that really stood out to me was Tan Tuan Eng. We've done a few mostly local authors, but yeah, we've managed to speak to quite a lot of international authors as well.
I
Rutger
guess I get.
Bregman.
I guess for me it was John Connolly,
Hmm.
because I am a huge fan. And honestly, Kamal, let me tell you, the reason I started this podcast with Diana is for two main reasons: to be able to fangirl on the authors that we love and to get free books. So when they actually offered John Connolly, because I follow his Charlie Parker series, very, very, they're like my old friends. When he walked into our studio, I was like, okay, man, we can end this podcast now. I'm cool, we're done. Because like I've actually met some, and he turned out to be such a fantastic guy. I think even you enjoyed talking to him, right, Diana? Because you don't really read, because he does supernatural crime, which is
Yeah.
completely not your thing, right?
Yeah, not a crime person. Have not read anything of his. I had to read something of his just for that, and actually didn't mind it at all. But yeah, it was really like, I think that was the moment we arrived, basically,
Mm.
like Hani said.
I was interviewed
I mean,
Stuart
like,
Turton. Yeah.
uh, so are there any more authors that you would love to interview? Maybe this year.
Oh, plenty. Becky Chambers, definitely, because we almost interviewed her, but it didn't happen. There were a few authors like Patricia Lockwood that we were supposed to interview, but she got COVID. There were Taylor Jenkins
Natasha
Reid,
Pulley.
yeah, Natasha Pulley, yeah. So I think during the COVID, because authors couldn't do roadshows, so in a way they were taking interviews anywhere they can get it. So we also got access to a lot of authors that were unexpected for us. But sometimes it's just a matter of timing. I think in general, Neil Gaiman, if we can ever interview Neil Gaiman, right, Diana? Or even Stephen King. I'm like, okay lah, we can stop doing this. Let's just go home.
Oh, that would be cool. Basically, I mean, like I just the opportunity to talk to people who are in the industry and who have published. I mean, like I suppose one a pair of authors that would be more famous, would be more well known to, especially the younger crowd, would be the author
David Leviathan and
David Leviathan
yeah.
and Jennifer. Hang on, man, just having just a brain freeze moment. So yeah, but I mean, like like just the opportunity to talk to a lot of these authors. Like, we may not necessarily be their target audience, but just being able to talk to them, be able to see what they think about things, and like just be able to discuss things with them. It's just a real privilege for us. Um,
Well, the
and
best thing about it is that they're also book nerds. All
yeah,
authors are book nerds, right?
yeah.
So to actually nerd out with them and ask them their own book recommendations has been fabulous, because
Mm,
like it's always different. You never, I mean, in a way, in general, I kind of know what my friends like to read. I kind of know what I like to read. But when you are asking an author what they like to read, it's actually quite interesting what they come up with. And a lot of them work in publishing as well. So sometimes they give you scoops of books that are coming out that you have to look out for. When we were talking to Zen Cho, she actually turned us onto Sarah Parker Chan, uh, which was a which was an incredible book. She who became the sun. Yeah. So
Mhm.
authors will lead you to other authors and other books. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of new books coming this year, I know Tan Tuan Eng is going to release his third novel. Uh, did you
Something
did
on
you guys get a
doors.
chance? Yeah, to read Prita Samarasan's latest.
No, no, we were supposed to interview
we're
her with
supposed to.
at Lit Books. In fact, I think her friend or agent reached out to us, but then at that time I was just too busy, and Diana as well. So we just couldn't we just couldn't interview her. I mean, I was a bit sad about that actually, because we were kind of looking forward to that. So the last Malay author we interviewed was Karina Bahrain for the Accidental Malay. That was uh, September, right, Diana?
Yeah.
Mm. Have you read the
Yeah.
book, Kamal?
Um, Shamefully, I would say not yet, but it will. Now
I
that you have
started.
mentioned it, now that you have mentioned it, tomorrow I'll be heading to my favorite bookstore to get a copy, and perhaps
I
maybe
see you
we
at
can
Kino's
talk
then.
about the book later. Sorry.
I see you at Kino's then.
Yes, I will see you at Kino at a certain time. um, do you think that after 4 years, like 4 years is, as you said, that your podcast is actually the longest at this point? Has it reached its targeted audience?
Interesting question. Um, we do get a lot of listenership from the States, from Canada. I mean, Singapore, Australia. But I think what was important for both me and Diana when we did this podcast is actually to give the Southeast Asian voice. Because whenever you listen to other book podcasts, like the New York City Libraries podcast, it's always their point of view, right? So for us, we wanted to represent the Malaysian reader, the Southeast Asian reader, and we also want to be a platform for Southeast Asian writers, which is why we always try and make a point that our challenge will always have something Southeast Asian. We try our best to interview as many Southeast Asian writers as we can locally as well. But of course, we are also fangirls of a lot of authors out there. Um, so I feel that we have quite a good listenership of Malaysians, which is actually, the show is for them to a certain extent. But in a way, it's kind of nice because we have introduced um, Southeast Asian authors, more Southeast Asian authors to the world in that sense, because we have listenership from elsewhere. So yeah, probably not yet lah, Kamal. It's a very small group of people lah who read a lot of books.
No, I mean, like here, here in Malaysia, at least, like because
Mm.
I was very surprised when I joined KL back, okay, to see that actually that there are more than 1,000 readers in Malaysia. I'm
Tengok lah.
sorry.
You mean readers by choice rather than being forced
The
to read for
readers by
school?
choice, yes. Not the ones who were
Ye-
forced to read The Pearl by John Steinbeck when they were 16. I mean, like, I remember because I think when I was teaching in Intech, there was a course called Introduction to Contemporary Literature. So my former students were actually majoring in engineering and biotech, and so they had to take this class. So if I ran into them many years, like as of now, I taught them like what, 11, 12 years ago. So whenever I ran into them, so I was like, "So, do you guys read any new books?" No. It's still Of Mice and Men, The Color Purple, and whichever miserable books that they had to read for their term papers. So, but I can see that the readers and the readership is growing, given the fact that when Sutaya was open, the lines were surprisingly long, and the same also actually I can say for S-Light Spectrum. But do you think that there are more works that we need to do to get more people to join our dark side?
Um, this is what I've discovered, right? Sometimes we talk to people and we ask them, I mean, sometimes they ask us, how do they make their children read more? Because, you have to compete with internet and you have to compete with YouTube. Um, I mean, and always, I feel that sometimes when you pick up a book and that book is not the right book for you when you were younger, it kind of turns you off reading. And then you also have a lot of people who feel that reading should just be to gain knowledge. There are people who don't read for pleasure. So I don't know. I think sometimes it's just getting the right book at the right time to the right person. I feel that leading by example is always a good thing. Children who read probably live in houses where their parents also read. Um, but I don't know. I feel that it's not all hopeless. I think that people will always want to read, but I think you have to make allowances that people now also read on ebooks. People listen to audiobooks. I mean, there's so many different ways of enjoying a book now, and I think that makes it a little bit more accessible as well. So you don't have to just don't have to carry a book around anymore. So I don't know. I'm hopeful. I think there will always be readers. But what I don't know, Kamal. I guess you are trying in your own way to make your students read, right?
Yes, actually, and I would say now sometimes it's successful, but most of the time it is not.
We don't have enough of a reading culture in
I kind of
Malaysia.
don't blame them because I would say that lately the prices of books have been steep.
Mm,
I mean, like those tiny, sorry, mass market paperback with bad printing quality of letterings, yeah, it can cost to 49 ringgit 90 cents now as compared to during when I was younger. It was only like 20 plus.
but then
And gone were the Penguin Classics, the 9 ringgit something Penguin Classics, the one in beige. It was no longer in production, I think.
but I think that the local book industry is thriving at the moment, because I think I think the one at World Trade Center, right? They had a book fair. I think it is the most sales most of people had. Like, I think Fixie sold out. So people are buying books, people are reading, and I think people are looking for, like I said, own voices stuff. So I think that there is a really kind of thriving underground local
Oh
local
yeah.
book thing going on, right? Not necessarily like the books that you and I read, but then I think there are people out there that are picking up books again. So maybe.
I mean, when you talk about book fairs in World Trade Center, the Pesta Buku Malaysia, yeah, I
Mm.
think more books sold are actually those reference books for SPM.
Fixie almost sold out, right? Summa fiction.
And yeah, Fixie.
Mm.
But that's the thing. I never. I'm yet to come across my students, at least most of them, carrying a Fixie title, for example.
Oh,
Let
okay.
alone the color purple.
That's why I mean, tak boleh dipaksa benda ni. Membaca tak boleh
Yeah.
dipaksa.
Tak boleh dipaksa, but I wish like gossips can be actually compiled into a book, like a gossip collection from the 90s. I'm sure they'd be very interested.
What Insta
Um,
poetry?
yeah. And then I think at the same time, let's not forget the government's initiative, like allowing readers to actually keep their receipts and actually get like income tax relief. I think the amount now is actually 2,500,
Mm.
and including your gadgets and whatnot. But again, people would think like, who would have buy books for 2,500? Well,
Well,
they haven't met that
Well,
person yet.
well,
yeah.
I
beli
wish
beberapa
whenever
folio
I see
dah
all
cukup
these,
kot.
I wish all these ties queuing up in front of Louis Vuitton, would actually queue up at Kinokuniya and at least belanja me a couple of books.
It's priorities, right? Is what you spend your money on. Like, we being people who love books, we don't buy the Louis Vuitton handbags. We go and buy the books lah, the special edition books and stuff like that. That's our branded lah, kan, in that sense. Mm.
I think we don't have enough people who are influencers, who are like celebrities who read, who show that they read. Maybe we had more of that, because you know that there are a lot of American celebrities who have their own book clubs. You know, they talk about books when they're on shows and stuff like that. They talk about reading the latest book that's out. We don't have enough of that, I think, maybe in Malaysia. We don't have people who are real influencers who are talking about books and, like, in that sense that they're really encouraging people to be enthusiastic about reading and wanting to find out, what's in stories. Maybe that's what we really lack. Enough people who are enthusiastic about books, who tell people what's in books that they need to go and find out, and to show them, like, what books have the stories that they are interested in, like which books have things that you might learn from, that kind of thing. I think we really do need to that. I think unfortunately, most people who are buying books are still parents buying books for their kids, and they're kind of like forcing children to read. They're not really showing kids that they themselves are interested in reading. They're not really showing kids that they are collecting books. They are going to the bookstores and perusing all the books and looking for books that they are personally interested in. And I think that is the problem. There's a lot of parents who say, how do I get my kids to read more? If you ask them, what are you reading, they'll say, me, I don't read. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
It,
that
it,
there's that
it's,
there's that kind of feeling like the reading is for when you're younger. When you're older, you have better things to do with your time and money.
Yeah, I'm glad that you actually touch on celebrities' influence. I mean, like from what I can actually see, from for uh, readers of Malay novels, they are actually relying on which novels was adapted into 7 p.m. or
Mm,
10 p.m. dramas, and that's
mm,
where the
mm,
readership, like, and that's
mm,
why which there was actually a brouhaha about a novel which was promoted by a bookstore, and I'm glad that the book in question has been pulled out from the market. Whereas in the West, we can see that towering figures like Oprah Winfrey, and as much as I'm not a fan of hers, but Reese Witherspoon actually
mm,
faithfully come up with their selections every month or every other month, and then you can see like all these young people on TikToks, they are following what books Harry Styles would read,
mm.
Kylie Jenner. I'm surprised Kylie Jenner is literate. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm just nasty. Never mind, they're not
Yeah,
watching this, so they
unfortunately
won't
for
speak to
us,
me.
I would say that one thing that I've noticed about reading culture in Malaysia compared to reading culture overseas is just that there are no there's there are people who are serious readers who read all the time, and then there are people who never ever read, and there's very, very, very few people in between. People who are casual readers who would, be occasionally enticed to go into a bookstore, or occasionally they will read something that is like, there is a talk of the town that everybody's reading right now. They will pick it up because either you're a reader or you're not in Malaysia. So if you are a reader, you would be reading anything that would come out. But if you're somebody who's not a reader, even if it sounded really interesting, you would be intimidated by the idea of reading a book. And I think that that's the sad thing. Like, there is no way that somebody who has not read for years would ever pick up a book, and I don't see why that is a barrier. That's one of the things that I think that you notice from being in a book club like KLBAC. You kind of like, you do see people say, okay, I see everyone being so enthusiastic about books in this book club. I also want to come and pick up a book and recommend something to me. It's seeing that everyone can get through a book. Give me tips, give me encouragement, give me ideas for how I can choose a book that I would like. And I think, yeah, if we could get past that mindset of either being a reader or not, maybe more people would be casual readers, and that would be better than never ever touching a book for years and years.
Yeah, which is
Mm.
interesting, because when we were in primary school, um, teach, like they have this campaign that we have to actually jot down whatever books that we've read, and those who actually read the most would win a bicycle or more books. So it's so sad to see that it is not being translated into a lifelong hobby. I mean, like it seems that people need some sort of initiatives to maintain that hobby.
Mm,
I mean, if by
yeah.
judging the book that I've read now, like I should have won a Tesla.
That would be
Although
Probably
I
nice.
don't drive.
probably a ticket to the moon.
Yeah.
On the Virgin,
Okay.
the Virgin.
Okay. So, ladies, now I think I would like you guys to share your top 10 books of 2022. I'm sure that the audience would like to know what are the books that two book nerds talking have enjoyed in the past year.
Um, yeah, I mean, we selected a whole bunch of stuff. Honestly, I was telling you that last year I was working so much that I didn't read as much. But we selected a whole bunch of different things. So maybe for the people who are listening, they can see a variety of interesting books that they might want to pick up. So we selected stuff that are quite contemporary, and yeah, and as you were saying, like you can get it at the bookstores here. I can't. What's the first one, Dino? I
Um,
think it's Haruki Murakami, right?
yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, the first one that we have, these are just. I mean, when you say choose your top 10, I think one of the things that is hardest is because when you're choosing a book that you like it for different reasons.
Yeah.
So it's hard to choose your top 10 actually. But yeah, okay. One of the books that I enjoyed last year was Haruki Murakami. He came up with this collection of personal essays, and the book is called Novelist as a Vocation. Um, so, if you're a fan of Murakami, you'll understand that most of his books are very surreal. There's a certain style that he writes them that it makes you feel like you understand the character very well. You're in their head. You really get to feel what they're feeling, and you will have this sense that you want to know what the author is thinking. Like, how does he think like this? I wonder what kind of mind would produce this kind of fiction, right? So in this book, you learn a lot about Murakami's own path to becoming an author, his creative process, his daily routine as a writer. And yeah, he even writes about his thoughts about the role novels and authors have in society, and like things like how he found his personal style, um, why he thinks his books have appealed to so many people around the world, that kind of thing. So it's a really nice insight into this fascinating author, a very prolific, and an author that has touched a lot of people around the world. So yeah, so I would say I would also recommend this book to anybody who wants tips about being creative, how to be more productive in your work life as well, how to be more produce more art, um, and building this work ethic that will help you to produce this great body of work as he has achieved. um, yeah, and how he manages to appeal to so many people who are writers. And yeah, if you're a writer or you're basically in any other creative capacity, I would say that basically in any industry that you're in, you would need to be creative in some way. You probably find something of value in his book as well.
Goes to show how busy I was. I actually haven't read this book, and I'm like, this is the one Haruki Murakami book I've not read.
I haven't had a chance to read any non-fiction from Murakami. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
the one
So
on
I'll
running is
maybe.
good. What I think when I write, what I
What
think
I
when I
talk
write
about when I talk about
talk
running.
about running, yeah.
I
That's
see.
that's
Okay.
I
All
really
right.
like that one. It's about his obsession
Okay.
with running and writing.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot about his personal philosophy, his outlook on how he gets work done, basically, which is honestly probably the number one thing that is holding a lot of people back from being really prolific writer, right? So it's like how he manages to get so much done. So
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Next book
Okay.
is
So
yours too,
what's
Diana.
next?
okay, the next book I think should be All the Seas of the World by Guy Gavriel Kay. So this one is a historical fantasy. Basically, it's a kind of uh, fiction that is based on history. So it's like alternate alternative history, a kind of a rewriting of what actually happened in the world like many years ago. So this particular book of his is set in the Renaissance era. It's about two people, Nadia and Raphael, who have been hired to carry out an assassination. And yeah, so they carry out the assassination, and this is all basically about how their actions reverberate throughout the different empires of the world and how it affects thousands of other people. And I think one of the books like this really appealed to me because you when you're somebody who's studying history in school, you hear about the broad strokes of history. So you talk about like World War I, World War II, but books like this that examine history from the point of view of individuals, they really let you really understand what it was like to live in those times. You can really take you there on a human level. Like you really get into all the different things that happen and how they affect you, and how they affect the society at large. And yeah, and just the impact of small changes and small decisions that somebody makes just on a whim, basically, and how much it affects people around the world. So this is something that I would recommend. If you found history to be very dry and boring, you need to look up alternate history books like this. um,
Mm,
and I, and
yeah.
I think I like Guy Gavriel Kay because he he has a very certain philosophy, a style of writing. And if you've ever heard of his name, he's actually famous for having worked on the Silmarillion. He was hired by Tolkien's son to help him to organize Tolkien's notes, to help him to get those notes published as a Silmarillion. And so you can see that same kind of focus on large sweeping historical events and how they affect um, individuals in the world, and how those people's choices actually affected so many others. So yeah, that's a book that I've read recently, and it's been on my mind. That's why I put it on this list.
Mm. I haven't read a Gabriel K in a while. He's a very emotional writer as well. Mm,
Yes.
yeah.
Interesting. And an interesting choice, especially when it's talking about alternative history. Okay, next.
I think next is tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow. I think this is both me and Diana's one of our favorite reads and one of our favorite book discussions. So some of these books that we are recommending, we have discussed it because whenever me and Diana like a book, we discuss it. So
Just to let you know that I read this book. I enjoyed it. It it almost made the cut to my top 10.
oh, you have your more discerning taste in books, is it? I'll tell you why I like. Okay, so the book follows a friendship. So it's basically a book that follows a boy and a girl, Sam and Sadie, from when they were kids until they're in their late 30s. So it is kind of like, I guess, like a friendship saga, if you want to call it, not a family saga, a friendship saga. And what I really love about the book, and the two of them, they connected over a game of Mario Brothers because Sam was in hospital because he had an accident, and Sadie was in hospital because her sister had cancer. So there are two kind of lonely children that connected over a game of Mario. And for those of you who love to play games, you understand that kind of connection you have with someone, to understand that language of gaming, of working together as a team. And through the years, they end up making video games together. Now, why I love this book so much is because to me, it really is a great window into the creative process. That sometimes people that you can create things with are more, it's almost like you're closer to them than you are with your lover, in a sense, that there's a certain language that you share together. It's a beautiful thing when you meet somebody who understands you on a very creative level. And I think because I'm a scriptwriter and I work in the industry, and sometimes just finding collaborators, producers or directors or actors who understand what you want to do is such a wonderful thing, that this book, even though they're making video games, right? And I want to play every one of their video games. Whoever has met somebody like that in their life, this book captures it beautifully. So their friendship, the fact that they never became boyfriend and girlfriend, right? Because to them that would jeopardize their relationship. So I feel it is a great exploration of the creative process.
Yeah.
And that kind
And
of
this
yeah,
book is safe to be read by, I would say, our teenagers, right?
yeah, 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 definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And it just makes you want to play video games because it's just a
Let's
joy.
see if
And
I have time for that.
yeah, I don't have either. Okay, next one is Fault Lines by Emily Itami. I think this is one of Diana's favorite. This is actually the first book discussion we did for 2022, right, Diana? We did we did a book chaser, right? I can't remember. We discussed this book, right?
Yes, we did.
That was like 12 months ago,
That was too long ago. Okay.
30 books ago. Um yeah, so this I'll start and then you can carry on. So this book, I like this book because it follows this woman named Mizuki, and she's basically a housewife, two kids, and she used to be a jazz singer. And it just goes into a window into a woman's life on how once she gets married and she has children, like her world becomes very small, it becomes very domestic. And she meets this sexy chef and embarks on, I guess, an affair. But it's more than that. It's not just a book about a woman having an affair. It is actually an exploration of motherhood. It's an exploration of what it means to be a woman who is trying to find her identity outside of motherhood. I mean, in that sort of way, right, Diana? And I don't know. It has a really great sense of place. It makes you really want to go and wander around Tokyo, because I love books that give you a sense of where it's set. You know. How about you, Diana?
Yeah, this one might be a little bit beyond, some of Kamal's students, I guess, because they don't quite get what it's like when you've married somebody and you've just become somebody's wife and mother, and you're a stay-at-home mother, and basically your world shrinks to just basically your family, right? That's all that is your world. And in a sense, this book is exploring the things that hold us together, but also the things that bring us joy. So basically, you when you get married, your husband is your whole world, and then your children become your whole world as well. But when you're so close to that, that becomes your everything, and it becomes almost like it's it becomes too small. It's not enough, basically. So like, even though that's your everything, you want different things sometimes, and basically it is a story about their love affair, but it's really about her love affair with herself, like how much she loves herself, and how much, and what, and finding the joy that she used to love, in the things that she used to enjoy, and she had to give all that up because children, and household and all that is so demanding. So it is really an exploration of about the choices that women have to make in life, and how ultimately you have to really decide, between your own happiness and the happiness of your family.
Oh, so
And
depressing.
yeah, it is a bit.
Yeah, definitely not what my students would like to read. Yeah,
Maybe when they're a little bit older,
Maybe a little bit older, yeah,
maybe.
or make them understand their mothers better. Maybe
definitely.
it's important.
Maybe it helped them
Yeah.
to prepare for it, because like we always think that that's the goal in life, like to one day to grow up and find somebody that you marry, and you have a family together, and they'll make you be happy ever after, and it'll make you like maybe think a little bit about whether you want to rush towards that.
All right. Something for them to ponder.
Hmm.
Okay,
The
next.
Liberation Day is yours as well, Diana. I
So
think
the next book on
we
my
on
list
yeah.
is Liberation Day by George Saunders. This is a collection of short stories, and George Saunders is, he's a Booker Prize winning author. He's he's very well known for his experimental fiction style. So he's somebody who likes to play around with the form and structure of stories. So if you think that stories, maybe this is a book that you would like to check out if you want something that is a little bit different, a little bit out of the box. Okay, so this book, some of the stories have an element of fantasy or science fiction in them. For example, in the first story, Liberation Day, it's people in it have given up some people in it have given up their lives to become nothing more than a voice. So they're basically just an object that is put in place, and they're told to say certain things. So they're like an instrument, like a drum or a piano, which other people can use to say the things that they once said. So, and then there's another one called Ghoul, in which the characters live in this theme park setting, and basically they're practicing skits that they will put on when visitors come to the park. But no one remembers the last time someone came to the park, and no one knows what they're doing. Why they're doing the things that they're doing. Okay, but mostly George Saunders likes to explore the things that human beings obsess over. Like there's a story about a neurotic mother who would do anything for her son, and like how far will you go when you think that somebody's done something to your child? And then there's another story about a man who becomes really obsessed when he tries to buy a house, and then the owner of the house says no, and years go by, and he's still stuck on that thought that like he was supposed to buy this house, he was supposed to live in this house, how what kind of life he would have if he still had this house. So yeah, George Saunders is an author that will make you think about um, the things that we get hung up on, like the things that we are not liberated from. Let's put it that way. So
All right.
yeah, it's a very interesting and thoughtful collection of stories that will help you think outside the box, because he plays with the form, he plays with the style, he plays with like your idea of what a proper story should be. And maybe this is something that is very relevant to your students, Kamal, because they will help them to be more creative in their work.
Hopefully, because I think last time I actually read his Lincoln in the Bardo, and I thought he could never top that.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
We have a memoir next because I read a couple of memoirs this year. Well, I'm not sure whether it's memoir. It's kind of like a food memoir. So it's I actually have the physical book. So it's
Oh
actually
wow.
Stanley Tucci's Taste. It's called My Life Through Food, and I don't know whether any of you have seen. He has a show on CNN where he goes around Italy and
I cannot hear.
Can you hear me? I think my mic.
Yeah. I can hear you. Okay. Oh, honey, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I think it's because something wrong with my wiring. But
Mm.
did
I
you hear the
see.
last bit of what I was saying about Stanley Tucci?
No,
I
didn't
think
hear.
I missed some parts of it, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, like basically, if you like food, and you like Italian food, especially, this is a really good memoir. It's very easy to read as well, and you want to go into your kitchen and cook some pasta after that. Just not necessarily. After that, I actually
We'll
cook
see.
pasta. Yeah, you don't cook,
We'll
Kama.
see. Ah,
Do you
I
not cook,
don't
Kama?
cook. I I love my nails and fingers too much.
Oh, you can wear
Okay.
gloves. Diva.
All right. Okay. Number 7.
Number 7 is the last book I finished in 2022, and this is what we were talking about: Stephen King being a palate cat cleanser, right? So the good thing about
Yeah.
Stephen King is that there's a way of how he writes that makes you feel comfortable, even when he's writing horror. Um, and I like it when he occasionally writes fantasy. So fairy tale is actually fantasy. I don't know whether any of your students realize that Stephen King not only writes horror, but he also writes fantasy like Through the Eyes of the Dragon, The Dark Tower. And he is especially fond of what we call portal fantasy, where you find a doorway into another world. So this is that sort of book. So it follows a boy named Charlie Reed that saves the life of his neighbor one day, and who has a very old dog, and finds out that in his neighbor's shed there's actually a doorway into, well, an underground road into another world called Empress. And over there, they have gladiator type fights. There's a cruel king that has taken over the kingdom, so it becomes really fantasy. But what Stephen King does with this book is that it actually goes into fairy tales, basically. That every fairy tale that you hear, you think is kind of familiar, is that way. So he borrows heavily from a lot of pop culture and fairy tales. Like the heroine in this, his name is Leah, but clearly she is actually modeled after Princess Leia. Things like that. And there's a lot of Jack and the Beanstalk and Rumpelstiltskin, sort of like, even the main character's name is Charlie Reed. So obviously there's reading in the fact that books were his escapism. And the thing about King is that his world is very, I mean, 1/4 of the book, actually nothing much happens. He just tells you about a person's daily life, and yet you still find yourself reading it. So for me, that's why reading a Stephen King book is like meeting an old friend, even though the stories are different. So if you fancy a fantasy by Stephen King, fairy tale might be something you might want to check out.
Yeah. I think the last Stephen King book that I've read was a collection of 4 novellas,
Oh,
full
Social
something, dark
Redemption.
something.
Oh,
No.
okay,
It,
okay, okay.
it's it was full something. You see, I've read too many
Full
books.
full dark, no stars, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me personally, that's the best Stephen King book.
Mm. He does very good novellas. I mean, Swasha Redemption was his
Yes.
novella. At Pupil was his novella. Yeah. He does very
Okay.
good friendships, mano to mano friendships. Okay, never mind. Moving on. Moving
Okay.
on. We're running out of
So
time, right?
number
Shall
eight,
we
yeah.
move on?
Yeah, number eight, because my stage manager just flashed 20 minutes.
Okay. I'm gonna speed through because I think all of them are mine, except for Sincere Tranquility. Diana also liked. Um, it's Carrie. I also have the book. It's called Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And Taylor Jenkins Reid at the moment is is having a great couple of years because a lot of her books are being made into TV shows. Daisy Jones and the Six is coming out as a TV show. Evelyn Hugo, and the thing about Taylor Jenkins Reid is that she writes very soap opera type plot lines, and yet you can't stop reading them because there's a little bit of depth as well in her characters. And this one is about tennis. So Carrie Soto is back. She's a tennis player who has retired. She's 36 years old, and then she realizes that her title of winning the most Grand Slam, so there's four main Grand Slam, is going to be taken over by a new tennis player. So she comes back out of retirement, and she is a player who nobody really likes because she really doesn't have she really is hardcore on the court, like she doesn't play the whole like I'm that game. So imagine Serena Williams, do you know what I mean, coming back out of
Yeah.
retirement and trying to get back her title, and also through the process learning because her coach is actually her father, which is very much like King Richard in that sense. um I love it because I love tennis, and I love it because it goes behind the scenes on the strategy on how you defeat opponents and so. But even if you don't like tennis, it's still a great read because it is a story of a woman that is trying to find her identity outside of tennis and also maybe fall in love. So there's a love story as well. So yeah.
So this Carrie Soto is actually a character of Malibu Rising, right?
Yes. And the thing about Taylor Jenkins Reid, her characters, they're all in the same world. Yeah. So Malibu Rising has a character that was actually in Evelyn Hugo as well. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
All right, next.
See your tranquility. You want to kick this off, Diana?
Okay, Sea of Tranquility, Emily St. John Mandel. I read everything that she's written.
Mm.
Yeah, so she's one little Easter egg that we that some people might like to try is that she has mentions of Malaysia in every single one of her novels. She mentions
That's
Malaysia.
right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I keep wanting to ask her, like we interview her, we ask her, why do you always put Malaysia in your books?
We really need to interview this woman
Yeah, we
because I
should.
love her stuff. Um, what would we call her category of books? Her category of books is very light sci-fi, hopeful sci-fi,
Yeah,
Dystopian.
humanist,
slightly
like
dystopian, but it's not.
gentle dystopia.
Yeah, kind of
Accessible
Yeah.
dystopia.
accessible dystopia. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sea of Tranquility is well her latest book, which came out last year, and it's set both in the future and in the past. So you start off by meeting a man in the 1920s when he goes to the wilderness in Canada, and he suddenly encounters a portal to a spaceship. And then you also meet an author, a very famous author, who leaves her home on the moon to do a book tour on Earth in the year 2203. And then it jumps forward as well to the year 2401, where humanity has traveled to the stars and has discovered time travel. And so there's a man who has to go back in time to find out why some events in the past seem to have changed. So, as we mentioned, most of her books are considered sort of sci-fi. They're speculative, and in the
Mm.
sense that they have elements of, a futuristic world, some scientific elements in it, but she doesn't dwell so much on the technology and science, but more about what drives people to do the things they do. And given the situation, given a change in technology and science, how does this help us to get to what it means to be human, and and what humanity really wants and needs, and how these kind of things don't actually change even though technology, time and place changes. So yeah, I definitely agree it's accessible dystopia perhaps, although it's not really dystopian in the sense that it's not hopeful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not George Orwell's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a YA dystopia, which is like somebody Hunger Games, where people have to kill
Yeah,
each other.
exactly.
Yeah, it's just people trying to get on with their lives, and and yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe this book because I also don't know how she writes them, because there's so many threads that she kind of juggles, but they all tend to be in the same world as well. I think her stories, right? Like people might actually know each other in her other novels.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah,
finally.
last book, which is another memoir, which I enjoyed tremendously last year, is Dave Grohl, The Storyteller. So if you're a Foo Fighters fan, a Nirvana fan, if you want to know more story about Nirvana, it's not that, although he does go into a little bit of his relationship with Kurt Cobain. But what is great about this book is that I listened to this in audiobook and he narrates it himself. I highly recommend you to listen to memoirs because most of the time it's the person themselves reading to you. And he is such a exuberant, well-adjusted rock star. I don't even know how to describe it. But it goes into all those crazy days where he used to travel in a van to do gigs, the love of music. It goes into how he learned how to play drums with pillows, and he used to use his teeth to actually beat out rhythms, things like that. So it goes into people that he has met. And the thing is that I finished listening to this just before Taylor Hawkins died. So Taylor Hawkins was their drummer. And I just remembered him saying that there was one part in the book where he said they were in the holding room after the concert and he was looking at everybody and he realized that everybody he loved best in the world was in that room. That was his mother, his wife, his children, Taylor Hawkins, which is a brother from another mother. And then I think 1 month after that, Taylor Hawkins died. And I really kind of felt it because I just read Dave Grohl's, I just went through his autobiography. So I kind of know their story. So yeah, it has been quite 2022 for him, right? He launched this book and then one of his best friends passed away. But yeah, if you want to read a well-adjusted rock star,
Which is
Dave
rare.
Grohl. I know. I mean, he does all the stuff, right? And he does ridiculous things. And yet he has a working marriage. He's not suicidal. He has lovely children. He
Yeah.
actually once came back from a tour. He actually flew back from Australia to take his daughters to the prom and flew back to do a show. I mean, like,
Yeah.
again, only rich people
He's
can do
doing his
this.
daddy jobs. Okay. All right. For 30 seconds. Okay, 30 seconds. Did he say anything nice about Courtney Love?
He didn't talk about her at all. Actually, he didn't write about her at all.
Okay. Yeah. Now we know his sentiment towards her. Yeah.
Yeah,
So those
it's
are
just
the
his
books
story.
shared. Yeah. By our guests, two book nerds talking again, Diana and Honey, on behalf of the production team and behalf of the community. Thank you so much for joining us for this year's Best Books of 2022. Let's do this again next year.
Thanks for having us.
Perhaps we can, yes, next year we can go somewhere fancier and we'll meet face to face and technology will not be a hindrance for us.
Boleh.
Oh, sounds
We can
good.
do it. We can do it in Kinokuniya.
Yes. Or S like Spectrum.
Oh yeah,
because they really
Yeah.
have
which I haven't
yeah,
been to.
because they will have corners where we can hang out and sit down and look pretty.
Yeah.
You do a live, right? From there. Boleh.
Yes, sure. Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much once again. Have a pleasant night, and I'll see you when I see you.
Have a good reading
Okay.
year, Kamal.
Thank you
Yes,
for having
to
us.
both of you as well.
Bye. Thank you to your
Bye.
team too. Bye.
All right. We do not. Time is very jealous of us. We do not have enough time, so I'm just going to end. I'm just going to show all the top 10 books very briefly, and then if you would like to know more about the books that I'm sharing, you can go to Goodreads, you can go to Amazon, or you can go to any websites that sells or discuss books. Okay, so without further ado, before I pass this back to handsome Hazim, I am now announcing the top 10 books of 2022 Kamal's Choice. Okay, number 10 is French Bread by Anne Tyler. Nobody writes family saga with domestic turmoil the way Anne Tyler did. So this is her latest. It covers from the 1950s. So if you this. At number 9 is actually the latest book from the master of short stories, Andrea Barrett. It's called Natural History. Andrea Barrett is known for writing her short stories, and she infused it with science, biotechnology, and anything scientific. Yeah, when you are trying to rush, you get brain freeze. 6 short stories, 5 short stories plus a novella. Um, Andrea Barrett was known for her books Ship Fever and also The Servants of the Map. So if you like to read short stories with scientific facts, but not science fiction books, you should get Natural History from Andrea Barrett. Okay, at number 8 is the Book of Goose from Yi Yun Lee. Now, Yi Yun Lee is actually, she was born in China and moved to America when she pursued her studies. And she wrote a book about friendships between two girls in a rural French area, and later they actually moved to a boarding school in England, and later they moved to a small town in Pennsylvania. It's just fantastic because she captured the fictionness of a fiction writer. I mean, like, because she was never in those areas when she grew up, yet she actually described the friendship between uh, these two characters whose names are Agnes and who's the other? Fabian, Agnes and Fabian. Yeah. All right. So if you like to read books about friendship, the Book of Ghosts by Yi Yun Lee should be on the top of your list. It's number 8 on my list. Okay, at number 7 is Anthony Mara's Mercury Pictures Presents. This is actually a book, a novel about a B movie studio. Okay, a female executive with an Asian actor boyfriend. But it's not really all about romance. It's all about how this B movie studio survived the World War II and its aftermath. Yes. At number 6 is actually a debut novel from Bobby Finger. It's called The Old Place. I pick up the book blindly. I was browsing around a bookstore, and then I just love the cover. Yes, sometimes those moments came to me, and I read the blurb, and I just bought it, and it is one of the best reads. Again, another book about friendship, how two women are destined to be together because of a tragedy that is affecting both of them. All right? Okay. 5 more minutes. The Candy House from Jennifer Egan comes at number 3. This is a sibling which won the Pulitzer Prize back in 2010. So if you haven't read that book, it's okay. You can just pick up this book and read. Remember, it's not a sequel, it's just a sibling novel. Yes. If you want to know more about the book, please go online. At number 4 is another debut, a short story collection from Maritza K. Rubio. It's called Maria Maria. Basically, the books deals with supernatural and life in Southern California. And what I enjoyed these books because it has some drawings. Yeah. Uh, okay. 4 more minutes. I'm a miracle worker. At number 3 is How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water by Angie Cruz. By looking at the title, it's funny enough. So basically, the story is about a woman in her 50s. She lost her career, so she had to go to this, I would say, a therapy session. But it's not really a therapy session, it's actually a retraining session. But instead of retraining herself to get another job, she used that session as a therapy to actually talk out her lives. All right. At number 2 is Hernandez Trust. Okay, there are 4 chapters in this book: a novel, an unfinished memoir, a feel good memoir, and finally a diary of the protagonist's wife. Okay, I wish I can go into details, but as I've said, time is running out. But please, please, please get this book. If you are reading, if you want to read 4 different books in a book, please get Hernan Diaz's Trust. Okay, and finally, the number 1 book, my most favorite book of 2022, is actually a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And let me cover this Oprah's label. Yeah, I'm not promoting Oprah. I just want to share people. Number 1 book, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This novel deals with abandonment, poverty, and opioid addiction. It's a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. Yeah, actually, the name of the protagonist is Damon, but because of some problems, people keep on referring to him as Demon. Okay, that's all my top 10. I've made it 2 minutes before 10:30. So again, if you would like to know more about the books, you can go to Goodreads. You can go to websites that sells books like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Powell's. These books are also available in our local bookstores. So before you can actually buy these books from overseas, please support our local bookstores. Place an order if they don't have it, and support our local economy and support our book industry. So I would like to pass now the event to our handsome and single host, Hazim. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in 2023 2024 for best books of 2023.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kamal, and 2 books that talking, which is Datin Diana and Honey, for sharing the list of the books that they have read in 2022. Their recommendation for books this year had not only been interesting, but it also inspired us to discover more books. Okay, I want to inform you guys that the Google attendance form has been dropped at the comment section of the live. And before we end this, we would the screen and the caption below. This is to collect your feedback to improve our program in the future. Thank you to all the participants for joining this event.